deep in the remote mountains of Montana, where no one could hear the cries beneath the roof of an old wooden cabin. Clara Whitmore lived through a private hell, trapped with a veteran husband haunted by the ghosts of war. But on one stormy night, as the crack of a leather belt tore through the silence and lightning lit up the darkness of despair, an unexpected creature shattered the door to her prison, and what happened next, no one could have ever imagined. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, don't forget to subscribe. A small wooden cabin stood deep in the Montana wilderness, surrounded by towering pines and rugged hills. It was far enough from any town that, on quiet mornings, the only sounds Clara Whitmore could hear were rustling of fir needles and the occasional call of a distant hawk. She and her husband, Nathan Whitmore, had lived there for 3 years now. In the beginning, they believed it was going to be a dream retreat, a sanctuary where they would wake up to sunshine and unspoiled nature every day. But over time, the dream turned into a prison. The walls felt closer, the silence no longer comforted. It had become a place that trapped Clara Whitmore in ways she never could have predicted. Nathan Whitmore was a Marine Corps veteran who had served in Iraq. When he first returned to the United States, there was a hopeful glow in his eyes, an eagerness to start fresh in a quiet corner of the world. Clara Whitmore had supported him wholeheartedly. She loved his sense of duty, the respectful way he treated her at first, and the gentleness beneath his toughened exterior. But the war had left its imprint: nighttime sweats, thrashing in bed, sudden fits of paranoia. Each day that hopeful glow dimmed a little more. Before either of them fully noticed, the shadow of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, began to devour the man Clara Whitmore once recognized. He would frequently jolt awake after midnight, gasping for air, calling out names of fallen comrades. Sometimes he screamed for them not to enter a certain building, or yelled out cryptic commands. Clara Whitmore initially tried to soothe him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. But Nathan Whitmore would push her away, insisting he was fine, that he didn't need help from shrinks who wouldn't understand. Over time, his refusal to seek proper treatment slowly metamorphosed into simmering anger. He became restless during the day, snapping at Clara Whitmore over trivial things: a dish not washed properly, a minor sound that startled him, a conversation he interpreted as disrespect. His controlling behavior began innocently enough. He would comment on how Clara Whitmore spoke with neighbors if she met them while running errands in the nearest town. He criticized the radio station she listened to, claiming it played music filled with nonsense. Then the restrictions escalated. Nathan Whitmore blocked calls on her cell phone, insisted on seeing her text messages, and demanded that she no longer drive into town unless he was with her. The nearest neighbors were many miles away, but even that was too close in Nathan Whitmore's view. He wanted no visitors, no interference, no watchful eyes. Clara Whitmore found her world reduced to the cabin's walls, the porch she sometimes swept, and the overgrown yard out back. Whenever Clara Whitmore objected, he grew furious. At first it was shouting, sometimes punching the cabin wall. But then Nathan Whitmore found a new method. He had an old military belt, thick and worn from his time in the desert. He called it a discipline tool, joking bitterly that it had kept young Marines in line. Clara Whitmore quickly discovered he wasn't joking. Whenever she displeased him, maybe she spent too long chopping firewood or tried to use the phone without his permission, he would take out that belt. The first time she stood there in disbelief, convinced he was bluffing, but he was. The belt lashed the side of her arm, leaving a stinging welt. Tears welled in her eyes. But Nathan Whitmore told her to be silent, that she would wake the ghosts. As weeks became months, Clara Whitmore felt like she was drowning in shadow. Her bright gray eyes, once filled with curiosity and warmth, seemed clouded over, as if permanently fogged by a never-ending drizzle. Whenever she crossed in front of a mirror, she hardly recognized the woman she had become. She hardly recognized the man Nathan Whitmore had become, either a silent sentinel with a constant scowl, easily triggered by nightmares, and the incessant echoes of war. And yet, in the midst of this quiet devastation, one comforting presence remained: Titan, the tall ebony horse that Clara Whitmore's father had given her when she was 17. In those days, Titan had been her companion on long rides through golden fields. Now he dwelled in a modest stable behind the cabin. Nathan Whitmore wanted to sell the horse, calling it an extra mouth to feed. But Clara Whitmore refused. The stable was the only place on the property that offered her any real sense of peace. When Clara Whitmore visited him, Titan would lower his head, brushing his muzzle against her cheek, as if to say, "I'm here." That simple gesture was sometimes enough to make her feel less alone. Yet, Nathan Whitmore rarely allowed her to ride Titan anymore. He insisted she remain close to the cabin. On the rare occasions she was permitted to walk out back, she would stand by the stable door and talk to Titan in a hushed tone, letting the horse's calm presence fill her with a small spark of hope. Whenever she stroked his mane, it felt like a faint link to the life she once had. Before Iraq, before the belt, before the silence and fear had swallowed her entire world. Though she never would have guessed it, that spark of hope, a tall black horse, would soon become the catalyst for an event that neither she nor Nathan Whitmore could have anticipated. Late one afternoon, the skies above Montana shifted with an ominous swiftness. Thick clouds rolled in, darkening the horizon like a curtain drawing shut. Clara Whitmore felt the wind pick up, whistling sharply through gaps in the cabin's walls. She hurried to close the windows, peering out toward Titan's stable. The horse stood firm, his ears pinned back as gusts brushed through the surrounding pines. Overhead, thunder rumbled in the distance, like an advancing army stomping ever closer. She sensed an unsettling tension. More than just the storm, something felt ready to snap. The air crackled with electricity. Clara Whitmore shut the last window and stepped back just as a flash of lightning illuminated the yard. At that moment she caught a glimpse of Titan's silhouette, pressed against the stable door. Restless, she placed a hand on her chest, inhaling, telling herself it was only a storm. A few hours later, the front door was flung open so violently it slammed against the interior wall. Nathan Whitmore stumbled in, coat dripping, whiskey bottle in hand. Rainwater pooled around his boots as he kicked the door closed behind him. Clara Whitmore froze by the kitchen counter. She caught the sharp reek of alcohol and the raw anger in his eyes. "So," he growled, "you think I don't notice your little smiles at the gas station, huh?" He slurred the words slightly, but the hostility behind them was clear. Clara Whitmore felt her stomach twist. The last time she'd been in town, she had thanked the young cashier with a polite nod and smile. Evidently, Nathan Whitmore had never let that moment go. She tried to keep her voice steady. "He was just handing me change. Nathan Whitmore." I smiled because he was. "Don't talk to me like I'm stupid." Nathan Whitmore spat, his fist clenched around the neck of the whiskey bottle. The near-empty contents sloshed ominously. "I've seen the way men look at you. And you, always needing some reason to go out, always wanting to talk to someone else." His gaze darted around, as if searching for imaginary watchers in the corners. Lightning flashed outside, followed by a crash of thunder so intense it rattled the window. Clara Whitmore trembled, not sure if it was the storm or Nathan Whitmore's presence that made her heart race. Possibly both. She swallowed, trying once more to diffuse his fury. "Nathan Whitmore, I was polite. That's all. There's nothing between." He cut her off by hurling the half-empty bottle across the room. It crashed into a wooden chair, shattering glass and splashing whiskey onto the floor. Clara Whitmore shrank back, hugging the wall. She knew how quickly this could escalate. Slamming his hand on the nearest table, Nathan Whitmore roared, "You think I don't know your secrets? Think I haven't seen how you wait for me to leave? Probably dreaming of meeting someone else behind my back." There was a wildness in his eyes, part heartbreak, part delusion. It reminded Clara Whitmore of the nights he would shoot awake, shrieking orders to men who weren't there. As Nathan Whitmore began pacing, flipping furniture in his path, she realized there was no calming him now. "He's gone," she whispered to herself. "That kind gentleman is gone." She tried to slide away from him, hoping to reach the far corner of the room for some semblance of safety. But Nathan Whitmore was swift in his anger, stepping into her path, forcing her to remain pinned near the wall. Outside, the wind shrieked, and the metallic roof groaned under the assault of the storm. Rain hammered the wooden walls, each drop sounding like a small drumbeat for the chaos unfolding inside. The cabin flickered with the sporadic light of distant lightning strikes, revealing the tension on Clara Whitmore's pale face, and the rage twisting Nathan Whitmore's features. In the stable, Titan let out a series of loud neighs, echoing fear or unease. Clara Whitmore turned her head toward the window, seeing the horsepaw at the stable floor. She thought, "He knows something's wrong. He can sense it." That knowledge brought her little comfort. Though as she now faced Nathan Whitmore's uncontrollable wrath, he advanced on her, his chest heaved, breath ragged. She could almost smell the adrenaline, that raw, desperate energy driving him. Then, in a sudden movement, he spun and knocked over the table. Dishes clattered to the ground, splintering. Clara Whitmore nearly tripped backward, raising her arms defensively. Pain, guilt, and unspent trauma swirled inside Nathan Whitmore, like a poisonous cocktail. She could see it in his eyes, as though the lines between his memories of war and his present reality had blurred. "You think you're so innocent," he snarled, "but I've been betrayed before. I know the sign." Another slash of lightning lit up the cabin's interior for a moment, showing a man whose mind was trapped somewhere between a violent battlefield and a lonely mountain cabin. Clara Whitmore forced herself to remain calm, or at least appear so. "Nathan Whitmore," she said softly. I'm not betraying you. Please shut up," he hissed, voice quivering with rage. He stared at her as though she were an enemy soldier, or a threat he needed to eliminate. Outside, the storm's crescendo built, the wind howling like wolves. Titan's frantic kicks against the stable floor grew louder, each hoof beat an urgent drum of warning. Inside Clara Whitmore's chest, her heart pounded. She couldn't fully process if her trembling was from fear of Nathan Whitmore, or from the knowledge that any moment now, he might punish her again, perhaps worse than ever before. She no longer had tears to cry. They had dried up long ago. All she had left was a numb dread, and a flicker of hope that maybe the storm itself would break first. They fell into a tense silence, broken only by Nathan Whitmore's heavy breathing, and the hiss of rainfall as it tried to break through the cabin's wooden defenses. Clara Whitmore inched toward the corner near the window, her hands splaying against the rough wooden panels. If he decided to strike her, there was nowhere for her to run, but she braced herself. Whatever's about to happen, I have to survive it, though she couldn't quite name it. Clara Whitmore felt a sense of impending doom pressing down. It was as though the swirling clouds of the storm mirrored the turbulence in Nathan Whitmore's eyes, and any second, both storms were bound to unleash something unstoppable. "Get over here," Nathan Whitmore commanded, snapping Clara Whitmore from her thoughts. He reached forward, grabbing her wrist with a steel-like grip, and dragged her to the middle of the room. She had no chance to protest. In one harsh movement, he kicked aside an upturned chair, sending it sliding across the whiskey-soaked floorboards. He huffed a humorless laugh, and cast a glance at the belt that hung on the wall, a battered old relic from his Marine days. "It's time you learned some respect again," he muttered. In one fluid motion, he tore the belt from its hook, coiling it in his hand like a snake preparing to strike. Clara Whitmore's throat constricted. This had happened before, but somehow it felt more ominous tonight. The storm outside seemed to amplify his fury. Lightning flat. Nathan Whitmore cleared the table with a violent shove, broken dishes clattering to the floor. He forced Clara Whitmore to bend over its surface. She let out a yelp as her stomach hit the wooden edge. Memories of every previous beating flooded her mind. The stings, the bruises, the shame. She squeezed her eyes shut, arms trembling. She wanted to scream, but fear strangled her voice. In the hush before the storm's next thunderclap, she heard Nathan Whitmore's ragged breath, and could practically feel the belt's worn leather. He muttered, "You're just like the new recruits who think they can outsmart me. You need discipline, proper training." The belt whined as he raised it overhead. Then, in a sudden crash of thunder, Clara Whitmore heard a noise that didn't come from Nathan Whitmore. It was something outside, something loud, a massive thud, like wood splitting under pressure. Her eyes snapped open. She recognized that stable was out there, and Titan was inside it. The belt came down once, catching her across the back. Pain seared through her, forcing out a strangled cry. She bit down on her lip to stifle it. Another crack of thunder rattled the windows, followed by a fierce, rapid pounding. "Hooves?" She heard Nathan Whitmore pause. His grip on her slackened slightly as his gaze flicked toward the door. Then it happened. The front door of the cabin flew open with a deafening crash. Rain-laden air rushed inside, swirling dead leaves and papers. In that instant, lightning illuminated the silhouette of something large and dark. For a heartbeat, Clara Whitmore couldn't believe her eyes. Titan, the towering black horse, stood framed in the doorway, nostrils flared, eyes wide with what looked like raw fury. Nathan Whitmore spun around, belt still raised. "What the?" he snarled, but he never finished the sentence. Titan charged forward in a blur of muscle and hooves, letting out a high-pitched neigh that reverberated over the wind. Clara Whitmore tumbled off the table, collapsing to the floor, as Titan collided with Nathan Whitmore, driving him backwards with the force of a runaway train. Nathan Whitmore crashed into the bookshelf behind him, sending paperback novels and battered manuals raining down around him. Clara Whitmore lay on the floor for a moment, stunned, Pain radiated across her back and arms, but her mind was awake. Adrenaline surged. She lifted her head to see Titan rearing up, front hooves pawing at the air. Nathan Whitmore, disoriented, scrabbled on the floor, cursing. "Goddamn horse," he roared, but the rage in his voice was now tinged with panic. He tried to scramble to his feet, belt dropping from his hand, but Titan lashed out again with a hind leg, forcing him to roll aside. Lightning flashed once more, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Clara Whitmore realized this was the chance, perhaps her only chance, to get away. She dragged herself along the floor, ignoring the throbbing in her ribs. She could taste blood, not sure from a bitten lip or some cut, but it didn't matter. Survival overshadowed all other concerns. The moment she put weight on her palms, they slid in spilled whiskey, making it hard to stand. Behind her, Titan stomped the floor, snorting. Nathan Whitmore cursed again, shouting for the horse to get out, but Titan stayed, a defiant bulwark between him and Clara Whitmore. She sucked in a ragged breath and called out, "Titan, boy, come on." Her voice cracked, but Titan's ears twitched. The horse took a step back, half turning its head as though to check on her. Anger flared again in Nathan Whitmore's eyes. He lunged forward, grabbing a broken table leg. "Stupid animal," he spat. But just as he prepared to swing it, Titan snapped its head around, letting out a furious neigh. Sensing how the momentum had turned, Nathan Whitmore hesitated, stumbling back. Clara Whitmore seized that instant to crawl closer to the horse. Somehow, Titan realized her intent. He lowered his neck enough for her to clutch at his wet mane. Her arms trembled with the effort of hauling herself upright. Every muscle cried out, but desperation fueled her. She managed to get one leg over the horse's broad back. Outside, the storm raged, rain soaking the threshold. Nathan Whitmore seemed to realize what was happening. "Don't you run from me," he howled, lunging in an attempt to grab Clara Whitmore's ankle. But Titan spun around, forcing him to recoil or be trampled. With no saddle, no bridle, Clara Whitmore simply clung to Titan's neck. "Go," she shouted, heart pounding so loud she could hardly hear the thunder. The horse responded with sudden speed, dashing out the open door. The freezing rain whipped against Clara Whitmore's skin as they bolted into the darkness. Behind them, Nathan Whitmore's roar was drowned by a booming crack of thunder. She sensed him rushing to the doorway, but she didn't look back. She could. Titan galloped through the yard, each hoof sinking into the muddy ground. In a flash of lightning, the horizon revealed the forest beyond. Clara Whitmore's entire body hurt, yet a fierce will to live drove her on. She tightened her grip, the horse's mane twisting between her fingers. She risked a single glance over her shoulder and saw Nathan Whitmore stumbling outside shouting something. But the words were lost amid the wind and rain. It felt surreal, like a nightmare and a dream woven into one. The horse beneath her, the storm unleashing its fury above. The man she once loved left behind in that grim cabin. But she knew if Nathan Whitmore grabbed his jeep, he could still try to chase her down. She had to press onward. No matter how the storm battered her, she took a shuddering breath as Titan cut a path around the cabin's fence, heading for the thick line of pines that promised a temporary refuge. Her mind spun. I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm free. But also, where am I going? She had no plan, no map, not even a flashlight. The lightning overhead offered fleeting glimpses of the terrain. Mud splashed up in arcs around Titan's pounding hooves. Clara Whitmore's wet hair clung to her face. Mixing with streaks of tears, she only half realized she was crying. Still, the cold air in her lungs reminded her that she was alive, truly alive in a way she hadn't felt for months. Titan's muscles bunched and released beneath her, powerful, unyielding, and for the first time it struck her that this animal, this silent companion, was the one giving her a chance at a real escape. Behind them, the cabin's windows glowed faintly, but the figure of Nathan Whitmore had disappeared from the doorway. Clara Whitmore wondered if he'd race after her in his jeep, if he was searching for a gun, or if he would lie there, stunned by the audacity of a horse and a woman. She couldn't guess. Right now, only one truth mattered. She was no longer inside that house of torment, no longer at the mercy of his belt. Rain battered them both. Lightning etched jagged lines across the sky, and thunder rattled the earth. But each powerful stride Titan took was a stride away from Nathan Whitmore and the violence that had nearly swallowed her whole. The night loomed vast and treacherous, but it also held possibility. If she could stay ahead of Nathan Whitmore, maybe she could reach a road or a neighbor. Or maybe she would vanish into the forest's black maw, safe only for as long as the storm concealed her. No matter what came next, Clara Whitmore clung to one thought. I chose to run. I chose to fight for my life. That realization alone granted her a spark of resolve she had almost forgotten. As Titan carried her deeper into the Montana wilderness, she prayed that the storm raging around them might just be powerful enough to break the cycle of terror once and for all. Darkness swallowed Clara Whitmore almost as soon as she and Titan left the faint glow of the cabin behind them. Clinging desperately to the horse's mane, she realized how vulnerable she was with no saddle, no bridle, nothing to guide him except her trembling hands and whispered pleas. Sharp pangs of pain tore through her body with every jolt, her back still stinging from Nathan Whitmore's belt. Yet a single thought overrode all else. I have to get away, as far away as possible. She felt as though the forest were closing in around them. The towering pines seemed like black talons scratching at the sky, their branches raking across the horse's flanks and tugging at Clara Whitmore's wet clothing. The wind howled through the treetops, drowning out all but the thunder of Titan's hooves on muddy ground. Each powerful step reminded her she was still alive, that she had chosen to escape, and that every second counted. Time lost its meaning in the pitch-black undergrowth. Without any flashlight or moonlight, Clara Whitmore could barely see beyond Titan's neck. Every so often, a jagged burst of lightning streaked overhead, illuminating the dense canopy long enough for her to catch glimpses of slick tree trunks and tangles of underbrush. Her body shook uncontrollably, partly from the cold, partly from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Her arms locked in place around Titan's neck, her knuckles numb from gripping so tightly. The sting on her back intensified with each bounce, as if the wounds from Nathan Whitmore's belt were being ripped open anew. Warm trickles of blood seeped through her torn shirt, mingling with relentless rain. She wanted to gasp, to scream, but her lungs burned too much to allow more than shallow, panicked breath. Her knees scraped against Titan's flanks, rubbing raw from the violent ride. Every nerve in her body screamed for rest, for some respite from this punishing flight. Yet she knew stopping was not an option. If Nathan Whitmore found the strength to grab his jeep, he would come for her. He would not forgive her for this attempt to break free. She forced herself to repeat a single mantra in her head, matching it to the pounding of Titan's hooves. Don't die here. Don't stop. Don't die here. Over and over, those words rattled through her consciousness like a lifeline. She was certain that if she lost focus for even a moment, she might slide off Titan's back and collapse into the mud. If that happened, she doubted she would have the strength to rise again. A gust of wind suddenly sent a downpour of rain cascading off the pine needles overhead, drenching her further. Titan let out a tense snort, but kept moving. Despite the chaos, Clara Whitmore noticed something remarkable. He seemed to have a direction, as though he knew which trails would offer the safest path. Even with no bridle, no coué, Titan chose to follow a narrow, winding corridor between the trees. She recalled stories of horses having an uncanny instinct for finding safe ground, or sensing hidden obstacles. Right now, that instinct was all that stood between her and utter disaster in this labyrinth of branches and mud. A low ridge loomed ahead, revealed by a strobe of light. Titan halted just before it, hooves slipping slightly on the rain's slick slope. Clara Whitmore's heart lurched. She half expected him to plunge forward, sending them both tumbling. Instead, the horse paused, pivoted, and carefully picked a new course that skirted the steep edge. Clara Whitmore managed a soft word of gratitude, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks. "Thank you. You're saving me again, aren't you?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Titan responded with a soft whinny that was nearly lost in the wind. She buried her face in his drenched mane, letting his warmth, what little remained in the frigid downpour, remind her she wasn't alone. Somewhere behind her, or maybe to the side, Nathan Whitmore's voice echoed in her mind. She remembered his final look before Titan had knocked him down. A flash of terror, of raw disbelief. For a split second he hadn't seemed angry but petrified, like a man who had lost control of everything. Yet she knew that terror could transform into rage the moment he found a weapon or the car keys. No matter how exhausted or hurt she was, She had to keep moving until she was truly safe. Lightning stabbed through the sky again. Clara Whitmore could see the forest thinning ahead, the canopy less dense. An hour must have passed, or perhaps 2. She could no longer measure time in a normal sense. Every muscle ached, her legs beginning to cramp from clinging to Titan. Still, she urged him on, navigating each root and rock. Whenever a fallen branch blocked the path, Titan either hopped over it or skirted around, guided by something deeper than training, a shared instinct to survive. Then Clara Whitmore heard it, a soft, trickling sound that rose above the wind. It grew louder with each step, until she finally realized it was a small stream. Moments later, the horse emerged from a line of conifers into an open stretch of terrain. Pale, watery moonlight, shrouded by the storm but still present, revealed a narrow gravel road. It snaked alongside the bank of a gentle creek, water glimmering whenever lightning flashed overhead. Breathing in shaky relief, Clara Whitmore clutched Titan's mane, urging him to stop. Her body screamed for rest. She slipped off the horse's back and landed on wobbly legs, collapsing to her knees in the loose gravel. The jolt of pain shot up through her ankles and battered knees, forcing a ragged moan from her lips. But the road was real. The surging water was real. The forest was behind them, at least for now. Shaking uncontrollably, she crawled a few paces, feeling the coarse stones press into her palms. Her vision blurred with exhaustion, and her lungs felt like they were on fire. Somewhere above her, Titan let out a concerned breath. She lifted her head long enough to see a dim glow in the distance, a faint halo, perhaps from a solitary street lamp or a house. It was the first man-made light she'd seen since fleeing the cabin. Letting out a sob of mingled relief and disbelief, Clara Whitmore sank onto the wet gravel, hugging her arms around herself. The constant rain hammered against her skull, drenching her hair, her clothes. But she didn't care. For the first time all night, she felt a glimmer of safety. The presence of a road, of any sign of human civilization, meant she might have a chance to find help, or at least not die alone in the forest. She pressed her forehead to the ground, tears slipping from her cheeks into the mud. Her heart thundered, each beat a reminder. I'm alive. I made it this far. Titan stepped closer, nuzzling her shoulder as though to urge her onward. But Clara Whitmore remained frozen in that moment, wrestling with disbelief that any of this was real. Only minutes ago, though it felt like a lifetime, she'd been inside that dreadful cabin, certain she would never escape. Now she was on a road, battered and bruised, but free, at least for one fragile instant. She closed her eyes, letting the rain wash across her battered face. Exhaustion stole over her in a near-fatal blanket of numbness. She had no idea how long she lay there, drifting in and out of awareness. But eventually headlights appeared in the distance, faint at first, then growing brighter until they cut a swath through the gloom. Clara Whitmore stirred, forcing her muscles to respond. This was it, either salvation or another nightmare. Desperation outweighed fear. She tried to lift a hand to wave down the car, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Instead, she slumped, half-conscious at the roadside. Titan, as if understanding she could do no more, stood guard, his dark silhouette illuminated by the headlights that inched closer. With the last flicker of her strength, Clara Whitmore managed a silent plea. Please, help me. Clara Whitmore lay curled on the gravel shoulder of the rural road, clothes soaked through, limbs convulsing with violent shivers. Titan hovered protectively nearby, not budging an inch even as the beams of an approaching vehicle fell over them. A sputtering old truck came to a halt a few yards away, the driver's side door swinging open. A woman's voice, low but urgent, cut through the steady roar of rain. "Oh, my lord," she exclaimed. Boots crunched over the pebbles, and soon the woman was crouching beside Clara Whitmore, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. Clara Whitmore forced her eyes open. Her vision blurred. She saw an older face, maybe around 60, gray hair pulled back in a careless bun, kind eyes examining her bruises. The woman wore a heavy coat, now getting drenched in the downpour. "My name's Eleanor Briggs," she said, her tone firm but comforting. "I'm a retired nurse." "Looks like you're in a bad way, sweetheart. Can you hear me?" Clara Whitmore parted her lips, but no words emerged at first. She swallowed, tasting blood and rain, then found a feeble whisper. "Yes?" she managed. Eleanor Briggs nodded, rummaging in the large tote bag slung over her shoulder. She pulled out a blanket, draping it over Clara Whitmore's trembling form. "Let's get you warmed up. I'll help you into the truck." A worried whinny from Titan made Eleanor Briggs glance up. She seemed taken aback for a second at the imposing black horse standing so close. But she offered a soft click of her tongue, as if greeting an old friend. "Easy there, big boy. We'll take care of you." 2. In one swift motion, Eleanor Briggs slipped an arm under Clara Whitmore's shoulders, helping her upright. Clara Whitmore gasped as pain shot through her battered ribs. Still, she managed to cling to Eleanor Briggs's coat, rising with a shaky breath. The nurse guided her gently toward the pickup, opening the passenger door. Clara Whitmore nearly collapsed onto the seat, a wave of dizziness sweeping over her. She felt warm air from the truck's heater wash across her face, a welcome contrast to the night's biting cold. Though she could barely move, she caught glimpses of Eleanor Briggs walking to the back of the truck. A second later, she heard metal clanking and recognized the sound of a ramp being lowered. She craned her neck, fighting the exhaustion threatening to pull her under. Through the rain-blurred windshield, she saw Eleanor Briggs carefully guiding Titan into a makeshift horse carrier on the truck's open bed. The horse followed as though understanding it was safe to trust this stranger. By the time Eleanor Briggs slid back into the driver's seat, Clara Whitmore had mustered just enough energy to speak. Her voice cracked with dryness. "Thank you," she managed. "You saved my life." Eleanor Briggs hit the locks, shooting her a kind smile before switching on the overhead light inside the cab. "Don't you worry about that," she said, rummaging for a thick towel and pressing it into Clara Whitmore's hands. "Dry off best you can. We'll talk once you catch your breath." As the truck pulled onto the road, wipers slashing at the rainfall, Clara Whitmore noticed the radio playing softly, an old country tune that was almost drowned out by the engine. She pressed the towel against her face, wiping a mixture of blood and mud away, wincing as she touched the bruises. She was warm for the first time in hours, but her body still trembled from adrenaline and pain. Minutes passed in relative silence, except for the hiss of rain on the windshield. Eleanor Briggs focused on driving, the headlights revealing an endless stretch of wet, empty road. Finally, Clara Whitmore found the courage to speak again. I need to hide from him," she whispered. "My husband. He's not well. He's a vet. Marine Corps. I had to run." Eleanor Briggs nodded, glancing over at Clara Whitmore. I see bruises like these, and that kind of panic in a person's eyes. I've seen it before. Listen, you don't have to explain everything right now, but you're safe here. My name's Eleanor Briggs Reynolds. You can trust me. I promise." Clara Whitmore exhaled, tears welling again. She wanted to tell Eleanor Briggs everything. How Nathan Whitmore had changed, how the belt felt against her skin, how the war never left him. But she was too spent. She nodded, grateful that Eleanor Briggs wasn't pressing for details or interrogation. "So how about that horse?" Eleanor Briggs asked softly, trying to ease Clara Whitmore's tension. "He practically loaded himself onto my truck. Smart boy." A flicker of a smile crossed Clara Whitmore's face, despite the pain. "Titan," she murmured. He saved me." Twice now, Eleanor Briggs reached a hand across the seat, giving Clara Whitmore's arm a gentle pat. "Well, let's make it a third time by getting you both somewhere safe. I live a bit farther out, but taking you to my place might be risky if your husband knows how to track you. Instead, I've got a friend's old barn we can use for the night. A real low-key spot." Clara Whitmore's heart squeezed in relief. "Thank you," she whispered again, overwhelmed by the kindness of this stranger. I can't even think right now." "Don't worry about anything," Eleanor Briggs repeated, flicking the turn signal. The truck rattled as it left the main gravel road for a narrower, winding path. "Focus on resting. We'll figure out the rest in the morning." The combination of warmth, dryness, and exhaustion began to lull Clara Whitmore into a half-dream state. Rain still lashed the windows, but she could barely keep her eyes open. "How many months has it been since I've felt this kind of relief?" she wondered. Even if it was temporary, it was enough for her to realize she was not alone in her desperation. The movement of the truck eventually made her lean against the window, eyes slipping shut. Every so often a jolt of potholes or a gust of wind caused her to stir, feeling the dull throb of bruises along her ribs. Through the haze, she heard the radio murmur a few lines of a somber country ballad about heartbreak and second chances. A bitter laugh caught in her throat. "If only heartbreak was the worst I had to endure." 15 minutes passed in disjointed half-consciousness. Then Eleanor Briggs's voice anchored her again. "Clara Whitmore. Honey, we're here." She lifted her head, blinking. The headlights illuminated an old structure just off the road, half hidden behind a stand of trees. It looked like a barn, a large rustic outbuilding made of weathered planks. The roof was metal, glinting under the flickering glow. No nearby houses, no sign of human activity. Ideal for hiding. The truck lurched to a stop. Eleanor Briggs killed the engine and hopped out, grabbing her coat from the back seat and motioning for Clara Whitmore to stay put until she cleared a path. Clara Whitmore used the door handle to pull herself upright. Even that simple act made her wince. Her entire body was a tapestry of ache. Eleanor Briggs opened the tailgate, fiddling with the ramp. A few soft murmurs from outside, and Titan's hooves thumped as he descended. Clara Whitmore forced herself to step out into the drizzle, ignoring the swirl of pain from her battered knees. When she came around the back of the truck, she found Eleanor Briggs hooking a small lantern to the barn door. "Help me slide it open," Eleanor Briggs said. "We'll get you and Titan inside." Out of this cursed rain, Clara Whitmore braced against the door's edge, pushing it with what little strength she had left. The heavy wood creaked, scraping over soggy earth. Inside, the barn was dark and smelled of old hay, dust, and lingering memory. Eleanor Briggs snapped on the lantern, revealing a mostly empty space. A few bales of straw lay stacked in one corner, along with a sagging workbench. Titan nudged Clara Whitmore's back gently, as if checking if she could walk. She stroked his muzzle, giving a faint smile. "I'm okay," she said softly, though she wasn't sure how true that was. "You can bed down here," Eleanor Briggs said, her eyes sweeping the space. "Might not be the Ritz, but it'll keep you out of sight until we figure out our next move." Clara Whitmore's throat felt tight. "I don't know how to thank you," she managed. I thought no one would stop." Eleanor Briggs shook her head with a gentle smile. "I was a nurse for over 30 years. You learn to trust your gut when to intervene. You know?" She patted Clara Whitmore's shoulder. "Try and rest. I'll be back in a bit with some supplies and to make sure that husband of yours doesn't come snooping around. If you hear anything suspicious, lock the doors and stay quiet." The word lock made Clara Whitmore grimace. The door had no real latch, only a rusted chain. But she nodded. "Okay." Within minutes, the truck's engine coughed back to life. The beams of the headlights receded down the narrow road, leaving Clara Whitmore in a flickering halo of lantern light. She pulled the barn door shut as best she could, hooking the chain to keep it from blowing open. Finally alone, she leaned against the rough wall, breath ragged. Titan stood at her side, ears flicking in the gloom. She stroked his neck, pressing her forehead to the horse's coat. "You saved me," she whispered, voice trembling. "I don't know where we go from here, but we made it this far." For the first time in a long while, she felt a fragile sense of safety, even if it rested on the kindness of a stranger and the presence of a faithful horse. She slid down to the barn floor, ignoring the aches in her legs, and let the darkness close around her. The last thing she remembered was Titan's steady breathing nearby, far more comforting than any lullaby she could have imagined. When Nathan Whitmore finally regained consciousness, he lay sprawled on the cabin floor, whiskey pungent in his nostrils, the taste of blood on his tongue. A throbbing pain coursed through his back and shoulder where Titan had slammed him. Stifling a groan, he braced a hand against the overturned table and pushed himself upright. The entire room reeked of spilled alcohol, shards of glass glinting in the faint light. Disoriented, he glanced around, searching for Clara Whitmore, but found only emptiness. "Clara Whitmore," he roared, a voice echoing off the cabin walls. No answer. He staggered, noticing the wide-open door battered by the storm. Rain had puddled on the threshold. His mind raced, memories returning in chaotic flashes. The horse charging, Clara Whitmore slipping out of his grasp. He let out a feral snarl, slamming his fist onto the table. The top splintered beneath the force. He realized with mounting fury that Clara Whitmore was gone, and that Titan was gone, too. Rain dripped onto his forehead from a leak in the roof, but he didn't care. Rage and humiliation burned in his veins like acid. PTSD had taught him to expect danger in every shadow, to lash out before his enemies could strike first. But this? A traitorous wife and a damn horse? He wiped the blood from his split lip, spitting it onto the floor. Letting out a near animalistic growl, he scanned the cabin for any sign of which direction Clara Whitmore might have fled. He found no immediate clues, only the gaping doorway that led into the storm. She could be anywhere by now. Then he remembered. The Jeep. I can catch her. Nathan Whitmore limped to the corner where he'd left his keys, thankful they were still there. Whatever illusions of tenderness or second chances remained had vanished, replaced by a savage need to reclaim what he believed was his. He flung himself out the door into the driving rain. The Jeep was old and battered, headlights dim, but the engine coughed to life on the third try. He revved it hard, tires spinning in the mud before gaining traction. "You can't run from me," he muttered under his breath, imagining Clara Whitmore's terrified face. "You think you can hide? I'll show you what happens to deserters." The memory of being abandoned in Iraq, of losing men he considered brothers, coiled in his mind, fueling his rancor. He turned the Jeep onto the main road leading away from the cabin. Lightning illuminated the wet gravel for a split second, revealing fresh hoofprints in the mud. A twisted grin curled his lips. They were sloppy, easy to track. "Gotcha," he murmured. Hunching over the wheel, he pressed the gas pedal, ignoring the squeal of worn tire. In the meantime, Eleanor Briggs's truck barreled through the dark, headlights barely cutting the sheets of rain. She gripped the wheel with confidence, glancing every so often in the rearview mirror to check if the battered Jeep was still following. Indeed, a pair of headlights bobbed behind her, gradually closing the distance. She pressed her lips together in a thin line. "This isn't the first time I've faced a man in a rage," she thought grimly. After decades in emergency rooms, she had seen drunken fights, domestic violence cases, and wounded soldiers wrestling with nightmares. Nothing shocked her anymore, but that didn't mean she would let her guard down. She coaxed the truck into a sharper turn, leaving the main ruts and potholes jostled the vehicle. A glance in the side mirror confirmed that the Jeep had followed her onto this back road. "Good," she told herself, "as long as I keep him on my tail, he won't notice Clara Whitmore's tracks leading to the barn." She pictured the petrified look in Clara Whitmore's eyes. That memory fueled her determination to divert Nathan Whitmore as far from the barn as possible. A flicker of headlights in her mirror told her Nathan Whitmore was edging even closer. They were about to reach a T intersection, flanked by dense fields. Eleanor Briggs slowed, the truck's tires sending mud splattering in every direction, and then deliberately turned onto a narrower dirt path that led away from the hills. The Jeep's headlights swung after her. He was definitely fixated on the chase, next to her. The passenger seat was empty, save for a few blankets and supplies. She caught herself glancing at it, wishing Clara Whitmore were there. Though logically she knew it was best the young woman had jumped out and slipped into the wood. Eleanor Briggs prayed that Clara Whitmore would manage to hide in the barn undetected, until dawn. The nurse could almost hear the pounding of her own heart each time she glimpsed those headlights in the mirror. "I've got to lead him somewhere well away from her, and maybe close to the highway. The state police can handle the rest." The plan solidified in Eleanor Briggs's mind. The farmland eventually intersected with a larger paved road that connected to the highway. If she could draw Nathan Whitmore there, cops might spot his reckless drive. She pressed the accelerator, bracing herself against the wheel. Through the shudder of the truck, she felt a surge of reassurance. "Just a bit more, old girl. We can do this." Clara Whitmore, meanwhile, crouched inside the musty barn, breathing hard. She had led Titan deeper into the structure, away from the door. The horse pawed at the ground, still restless from the frantic chase. A single lantern flickered, casting elongated shadows on the walls. Outside, the downpour continued, drumming on the barn's tin roof in a relentless staccato. She sank onto a small stack of straw. Her muscles throbbed from the ride through the forest, from the beatings, from sheer exhaustion, yet relief warred with fear inside her. He might find me, but Eleanor Briggs said she'd lead him away. She wrapped her arms around her knees, tucking her chin in, eyes darting to every sound. It was quiet now, aside from the storm and Titan's uneasy breathing. A few times she thought she heard the distant growl of an engine, but it could just as easily have been thunder. Wincing, she shifted her weight, trying to avoid the bruises that dotted her legs and ribs. The barn's old boards groaned, and the wind whistled through cracks in the wall. Each new noise made her flinch, as though expecting Nathan Whitmore's figure to burst in at any second. Titan nosed her shoulder, exhaling hot breath against her ear. That small gesture told her they were safe for the moment. She reached up, stroking the horse's damp muzzle. "We made it," she whispered. "You did so well out there." Titan blinked, as if acknowledging her words. She marveled at how quickly he had adapted to galloping blind in a storm, carrying her across treacherous terrain. Without him she would be helpless, but the thought of Nathan Whitmore gnawed at her mind. The raw anger in his eyes had been terrifying but also laced with a kind of confusion. Sometime in the past, that man loved me. Now he hates me, or maybe sees me as the enemy. She swallowed hard, trying to banish the memory of his voice. She wasn't sure if it was possible to find pity in her heart right now. Too many bruises formed a barrier. She shivered at the recollection of how his nightmares about Iraq had worsened over the past year. How he'd sometimes stare out the window and whisper names. When he was calm, he'd admit that the war never ended for him, that he woke up each morning expecting mortar fire. Clara Whitmore had tried to be gentle, but she had no training, no real understanding of how to help him carry that burden. Over time, his paranoia had twisted her kindness into perceived betrayal. She exhaled, frustration prickling her eyes. If only I could have gotten him help soon. But that thought looped into guilt. She shook her head, pulling the blanket Eleanor Briggs had given her closer around her shoulders. She reminded herself that no personal trauma justified violence. He had chosen to lash out, chosen to harm her. She had done what she could. There was no turning back the clock. For a fleeting moment, tears welled in her eyes, but she fought them down. I can't break down now. Surviving comes first. Minutes ticked by in tense solitude. Clara Whitmore periodically rose to check the chain on the barn door, pressing an ear against the wood. She heard only the night's chorus, raindrops, wind, and the distant rustle of trees. Lightning flickered now and then, revealing glimpses of farmland outside. Each flicker froze her in place, but no silhouette appeared, no Jeep's headlights. She took that as a positive sign. She slumped back on the straw, her eyelids weighed heavily, fatigue dragging her downward. She let them close, just for a moment. A swirl of half-formed nightmares and half-remembered images of the cabin began to invade her thoughts. She jerked awake every few minutes, heart pounding. No, stay alert, don't let him catch you unawares. Titan's presence grounded her. She could hear him shifting his weight, shaking off raindrops. Now and then he stomped a hoof. Clara Whitmore reached out and touched his leg, letting that contact soothe her. We'll be okay, she murmured, trying to convince herself as much as him. Nathan Whitmore, on the other hand, found himself careening down a rough dirt track after Eleanor Briggs's taillights. The Jeep's worn tires slipped, fishtailing in the mud. He wrestled the steering wheel, cursed. The windscreen wipers squeaked in futility, the headlamps barely illuminating the next 10 feet of road. Ahead, the truck jerked into another turn. He clenched his jaw, refusing to lose sight of that vehicle. He didn't know who the driver was, only that they must have picked Clara Whitmore up. The presence of a horse trailer or some cargo bed made him think they were helping her escape. No one steals from me, he thought, knuckles wide against the wheel. He pressed the accelerator even harder. The Jeep lurched, nearly spinning out, but he somehow held it on course. A guttural laugh escaped him. You can run all you want, but I'll find you, he muttered. Perhaps the storm had stolen his sense of reality, or perhaps his own fear was fueling this mania. His eyes burned, and every so often he felt a wave of dizziness, either from the blow to his head, or from pure fury. A fleeting voice in his mind whispered that this was insane. He was chasing a random truck driver in the dead of night, in a raging storm, all because he believed Clara Whitmore was inside, but the nightmares had made him see everything as a threat. He refused to think about what might happen if he succeeded in forcing that truck off the road. Suddenly the truck ahead swerved onto a larger road, its headlights rising and falling with the uneven ground. Nathan Whitmore followed blindly, locked on those beams. The Jeep roared onto asphalt, tires squealing. This was no longer a quiet county lane. Faint reflectors on the roadside hinted that they were nearing a state highway. If I can corner them somewhere, but fate had other plans. Even as the truck turned a bend, Nathan Whitmore spotted the revolving lights of a police vehicle up ahead. Rain gleamed off the slick asphalt, as two red and blue flashes cut through the darkness. Nathan Whitmore's heart lurched. The truck braked, and Nathan Whitmore, reacting too late, slammed on his own brakes, sending the Jeep into a sideways skid. He yanked the wheel, cursed. The Jeep spun, scattering gravel as it lurched to a trembling halt a few yards behind the truck. Blinded by the swirling red and blue lights, Nathan Whitmore squinted, adrenaline spiking. Two figures in rain-slick police jackets emerged, shining flashlights, Montana State Police. Fear collided with the remnants of his anger. He leaned out the window, bellowing something about my wife, but the officers were already ordering him to step out. In that brief moment, Eleanor Briggs caught her breath.
She recognized these troopers. One had once been a patient of her. Calmly, she pointed at Nathan Whitmore, explaining he had been driving recklessly, possibly intoxicated. The troopers quickly read the situation in her eyes. Before Nathan Whitmore could protest, they insisted he exit the Jeep. The reek of whiskey spilled out as soon as he opened the. Thus, the chase ended in a downpour of rain and the strobing lights of a police cruiser. Eleanor Briggs exhaled, hand trembling on the steering wheel. She had done it, pulled him away from Clara Whitmore's trail. She watched the officers lead Nathan Whitmore away, his shouts drowned out by the gale. Back at the barn, Clara Whitmore had no idea how close or far Nathan Whitmore was. She only sensed a strange quiet that settled in. The storm still roared, but somehow she felt safe. Curled in the corner, eyes half-lidded, she let fatigue envelop her. At least for tonight, she had found a measure of shelter, a fragile lifeline. Tomorrow would bring a new test, but for now, she was alive, breathing, and for the first time in so long, not entirely alone. Clara Whitmore slumped against the thick wooden door of the barn, panting as she slid the rusty bolt into place. The echoes of her own ragged breathing seemed far too loud in the hush that followed. For a moment, she simply rested there, pressing her forehead to the cool wood, soaking in a stillness she had not experienced for what felt like months. Outside, the storm had begun to abate, but droplets of rain continued to patter the tin roof. Inside, the barn was dim, musty and overwhelmingly quiet. Titan stood not far from her, shaking his soaked mane and scattering droplets of water across the floor. His sides heaved as he steadied himself, yet within seconds, he was nudging closer to Clara Whitmore, as though trying to check on her. She turned slowly, muscles protesting, and let out a trembling exhale. When she reached up, Titan lowered his head. She buried her face in the horse's warm, damp shoulder, whispering, "We really did it." The surge of relief was almost too much to bear. In the stillness that followed, Clara Whitmore's senses came painfully alive. She could feel the sharp stings of bruises blossoming across her arms, the throbbing welts on her back from Nathan Whitmore's belt. The adrenaline that had carried her this far ebbed. Replaced by raw pain, a wave of dizziness left her knees weak. Normally she might have cried or screamed, but the tears refused to come. She had cried too much over the past months. She felt emptied out. What remained was a numb shock that she was here at all, and that she was finally, if only briefly, safe. She held on to Titan as though he were the last anchor in a storm. The horse huffed, shifting in place, but did not back away. Each time the wind rattled the boards, Clara Whitmore paused, bracing for footsteps. A shout, some sign that Nathan Whitmore had tracked her down, but only the soft drip of rain through gaps in the roof, and the rustle of damp straw answered.
Her heart thumped, counting seconds like a metronome of survival. Eventually, with her cheeks still pressed against Titan's coat, Clara Whitmore's mind drifted back to the early days of her marriage. It felt almost surreal to recall the young Marine who had swept her off her feet, strong, brave, and tender in ways that warmed her spirit. Back then, she had admired Nathan Whitmore's sense of purpose, listening rapidly to his stories of Iraq. Harrowing, yes, but always with a hint of hope. He had talked about building a life free from the noise and scars of war, somewhere peaceful. They had chosen Montana for its serene vistas and quiet roads. She had believed love could heal him, had wanted to be the gentle hand that guided him away from those nightmares. Yet piece by piece, that soft version of Nathan Whitmore had been dismantled by fear and paranoia. When he first started restricting her movements, discouraging phone calls, turning away the rare neighbors, she had told herself he was just anxious, that it was a phase. But each concession she made allowed him to tighten his grip, morphing love into a cage. Eventually, he shut her off from the world altogether, convinced she would leave him like everyone else. He refused therapy, refused help, and let the war wage on inside him until it spilled out in violence. Clara Whitmore had learned that living in denial only fueled his obsession. "I love you too much to lose you," he'd said the day he first locked her in the cabin. "So I won't let you go, ever." A shudder passed through her as that memory flared. She drew in a shaky breath. For so long she had blamed herself, thinking if only she had tried harder, left earlier, or found him a better doctor, maybe none of this would have happened. But standing in the barn's darkness, close enough to feel Titan's rhythmic breathing, She realized something else. She was alive. She had found a way out. Not because she was weak, or because she had failed, but because at some point, a person must choose life over captivity. The scalding guilt that had chained her began to loosen. She'd done what she had to do to survive. Slowly she uncurled her stiff arms, withdrawing her face from Titan's shoulder. Night pressed in around them, thick and silent. A faint moonbeam leaked through a crack in the roof. As her eyes adjusted, she noticed the silhouette of a broken ladder leading up to a half-loft, stacks of old crates in one corner, and the remains of what might have been livestock stalls. It wasn't much, but it was safer than that cabin had ever been. Clara Whitmore moved to a cleaner patch of straw, lowering herself onto it with a wince. Her body felt battered, close to collapsing. Titan followed, snorting softly. "You can rest," she whispered, her voice raspy. She had no idea if horses understood such pleas, but if any horse could, it was Titan. He had sensed her danger, torn through that cabin door, and risked everything to get her away. Perhaps that was enough proof of his understanding. For a time she simply sat there, letting the darkness cradle her. Thoughts swirled. Nathan Whitmore's once loving grin. The press of wildflowers he used to bring from the field. The day he told her about losing a fellow Marine in an ambush. She had held him then, promising she would never leave. She meant it, but she had also never imagined how war's trauma could turn a gentle soul into a captive of his own mind. How he would eventually take her prisoner too. In the quiet of the barn, with no immediate threat looming, Clara Whitmore felt a foreign sensation creeping in, self-forgiveness. She wasn't to blame for Nathan Whitmore's breakdown. She wasn't the cause of his violence. She had tried, she had endured, and ultimately she had found the strength to escape. That was enough. She exhaled slowly, letting her shoulders relax. "I'm alive," she told herself, half stunned by the realization. "I'm not the weak one." I got out. Leaning her head back against the wall, she closed her eyes. The pain was real, but so was the relief. She clutched that realization, letting it sink in. Maybe she didn't need anyone's absolution but her own. Tomorrow she might have to face authorities, or decide how to press charges, or figure out where to go next. But tonight, in the damp hush of the barn, surrounded by the scent of straw and horse, she allowed herself one small victory: to breathe free and believe that she was worth saving. When the first rays of dawn leaked through the barn's battered roof, Clara Whitmore found herself curled up against Titan's flank. She stirred, momentarily confused. For so many mornings she had woken to Nathan Whitmore's rage, or the oppressive silence of the cabin. Now there was only the gentle glow of sunlight and the quiet rustle of straw. Her back ached and her body protested every movement, yet she stayed where she was for a few moments longer, unwilling to let this fragile sense of peace slip away. Titan's ears flicked at the sound of an approaching engine. Clara Whitmore tensed, heart hammering. Fear told her it might be Nathan Whitmore, but logic insisted he couldn't be back so soon, especially after what Eleanor Briggs had done to draw him away. Still, she rose slowly, pressing a hand to Titan's neck. Outside, a vehicle rumbled closer, then stopped. A moment later came a soft knock on the barn door. "Clara Whitmore, it's me, Eleanor Briggs. You can open up." The older woman's voice held a calm note of reassurance. Clara Whitmore's throat tightened. She cast a quick glance at Titan, who responded with a snort. Gathering her nerves, she unbolted the chain and pried open the door just a crack. There stood Eleanor Briggs, wearing the same coat she had on last night, now alongside two officers from the Montana State Police. Their uniforms glinted in the new daylight. She froze, half expecting disapproval or suspicion in their eyes. But Eleanor Briggs offered her a kind nod. "You're safe. He won't be threatening you again." Cautiously, Clara Whitmore drew the door open wider, stepping aside so they could enter. The barn's interior illuminated fully in the morning light, the floor strewn with soggy hay, the stale odor of old farm equipment lingering. One of the officers, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s, swept his gaze around before speaking gently. "Ma'am, we're sorry to bother you. We're here to make sure you're all right." Eleanor Briggs folded her arms, smiling at Clara Whitmore in a way that said, "It's okay. I managed to bring Nathan Whitmore near a state checkpoint. He lost control and, well, let's just say he's in custody." Clara Whitmore's breath caught. Custody, the second officer, a woman with serious eyes, nodded. Yes, he was detained for reckless driving under the influence and resisting arrest. We also found certain evidence. Her gaze flicked down to Clara Whitmore's bruises, then back up. A belt with bloodstains, for instance, and we have his medical file indicating some significant psychiatric issues he never received proper treatment for. A tightness in Clara Whitmore's chest eased, replaced by a sensation she couldn't name. Part relief, part sorrow. She glanced down, Nathan Whitmore in a cell, or at least under lock and key. It was the last outcome she would have predicted, even though it was the only scenario that might keep him from harming her again. He's being held for further questioning. The male officer continued. We'd like to hear your statement as well, if you're up to it. You don't have to speak now. But she shrank back, heart pounding. Memories of Nathan Whitmore's threats. No one will believe you. No one, jangled through her. Her hands clenched into fists. But when she looked at Eleanor Briggs, she saw unwavering kindness. The encouragement of someone who had stood beside her, risked her own safety to save Clara Whitmore's life. Feeling the heat of tears threaten, Clara Whitmore drew a shaky breath. Yes, I can tell you everything. Titan pawed softly at the ground as Clara Whitmore began explaining the events of the previous night. From the first lash of Nathan Whitmore's belt to the moment the horse had broken in, she recounted how Eleanor Briggs had found her. The chase, the bond. The officers listened intently, occasionally nodding or jotting notes. Their professionalism calmed her frayed nerves. They neither doubted her nor bombarded her with harsh questions. At one point, the female officer said quietly, "You're very brave, Whitmore. A lot of people don't manage to get away or to speak out like this. It's commendable." Clara Whitmore swallowed, barely holding herself together. She felt raw, as though her entire life had been peeled open for inspection. Yet the sense of shame she expected never arrived. Instead, she felt validated. Slowly, she realized that not everyone saw her as a helpless victim. Some recognized her strength. Once they finished taking her statement, the male officer explained that Nathan Whitmore would be charged formally with multiple offenses: domestic violence, resisting arrest, dangerous driving, and more. The hospital staff would also evaluate him for severe PTSD. Clara Whitmore listened, arms folded around her middle as though bracing for a blow. She didn't know what to feel: anger at Nathan Whitmore, pity for his condition, or crushing exhaustion from the ordeal. "So that's it?" she asked, voice trembling. "He's locked away, for now," the officer said gently. "There's still the legal process, but he won't be able to approach you anytime soon, and you have the right to press charges if you wish." Clara Whitmore lowered her gaze. "I need time to think." She was acutely aware that a battle raged inside her. Despite everything he had done, a residual part of her remembered the man who once brought her flowers in the morning, or gazed at her with such admiration. But that didn't erase the violence he had inflicted. She wondered if she would ever sort through the conflicting emotions. The female officer set a business card on a dusty shelf. "This is our direct line. If you feel threatened, call us immediately. We'll arrange for a protective order if needed." A shaky nod was all Clara Whitmore could manage. Eleanor Briggs laid a reassuring hand on her shoulder, guiding the officers back toward the barn door. Before stepping out, Eleanor Briggs paused, turning back to face Clara Whitmore. Her voice was soft but firm. "You did the right thing, Clara Whitmore, and you're not alone in this anymore. Remember that." As their footsteps receded, Clara Whitmore let out a trembling exhale. Her entire body felt weak, as if she had run a marathon and only now realized the severity of her injuries. She sank onto a bale of hay, arms wrapped around her chest. Outside, sunlight spread over the farmland, chasing away the last remnants of night. Yet inside her, the real battle was only beginning. She had gotten out, had told her story, and Nathan Whitmore was temporarily contained. But guilt and relief, sadness and hope, all fought for space in her mind. She closed her eyes, resting her forehead on her knees. "I'm safe," she whispered, trying to make the words sink in. Maybe the hardest challenge still lay ahead: healing from the scars within. For the first time in months, though, Clara Whitmore felt a spark of possibility. The old barn that had witnessed her confession now felt less like a hiding place, and more like a starting point. When she looked up at Titan, who stood patiently a few steps away, she saw in his dark eyes a reflection of her own strength. She might not know exactly how to rebuild her life,
but at least she no longer had to do it in the shadows. A few weeks later, Clara Whitmore found herself walking through the doors of the Gallatin County Courthouse in Bozeman. The air smelled of old wood and fresh coffee, and overhead lights buzzed quietly. Her back still throbbed if she moved too quickly, but she'd been assured by the doctors that the bruises and welts would heal in time. What mattered more was her resolve. She was here to testify, to stand face to face with the man who once claimed to love her, and then tried to destroy her spirit. She entered the courtroom with measured steps, every muscle in her body taut with anxiety. She wore a simple blouse and skirt, no frills, determined to present herself plainly. Eleanor Briggs walked beside her, gripping her hand when she sensed Clara Whitmore was trembling. Together they took a seat at the front. Across the aisle, Clara Whitmore spotted Nathan Whitmore in an orange prison uniform, shackled at the wrists. His hair had grown slightly, and there was a hollowness in his face. The eyes that used to blaze with anger now stared vacantly. If he recognized her presence, he showed no reaction. The proceedings began, the judge calling the session to order. Clara Whitmore steeled herself, glancing briefly at Nathan Whitmore's defense attorney, a tired-looking public defender, shuffling papers. Near him, a prosecutor reviewed notes, ready to outline the case. The charges ranged from domestic assault to driving under the influence and resisting arrest. Clara Whitmore's stomach churned. This is real, she thought. This is actually happening. When called to the stand, she rose, heart pounding in her throat. She reminded herself of what she had decided in the quiet moments in the barn, and later, in the small guest room Eleanor Briggs offered her. She wanted justice, not vengeance. He has to be held accountable, she had reasoned. But the courts can't just punish him without acknowledging why he is the way he is. She raised her right hand, swearing to tell the truth. The judge asked her to state her name for the record. She obliged, voice trembling slightly. Then the questioning began, most of it straightforward, details of Nathan Whitmore's behavior. The night she fled on horseback, the chase that ended with his arrest. Clara Whitmore recounted the nightmares he had, the belt lashings, the final break when Titan intervened. Her words came out steady, though she felt tears clawing at the corners of her eyes. She refused to cry, not here, not in front of him. Midway through, the judge paused. Ms. Whitmore, do you believe the defendant's actions warrant a harsher sentence because of the violence inflicted upon you? Clara Whitmore swallowed hard. She cast a glance toward Nathan Whitmore, who remained motionless, eyes lowered. She turned back to the judge. I'm not here to demand a harsh punishment out of revenge. I want what happened to be recognized as the crime it is. He hurt me, threatened me, and he needs to be held responsible. But I also know Nathan Whitmore came back from war with deep wounds that no one helped him heal. This is about justice, not torture. A hush settled over the courtroom. Even Nathan Whitmore's attorney, who had readied himself to object, seemed momentarily stunned. Clara Whitmore pressed her lips together, forcing herself to continue. I want the court to understand that PTSD doesn't excuse violence, but it played a role in how he lost control. I spent a long time feeling guilty, wishing I could fix him. That's not for me to do anymore. But I also don't want him thrown away like trash. Eleanor Briggs, seated behind Clara Whitmore, offered a nod of encouragement. Clara Whitmore didn't dare turn around, though her heart lifted slightly at the support. The prosecutor asked a few more questions, verifying details of the cabin's isolation, the repeated patterns of abuse, and how Clara Whitmore had been prevented from contacting outsiders. She answered them all carefully, determined not to omit the ugliness of Nathan Whitmore's action. The judge requested a psychological evaluation from the appointed psychiatrist, who stepped forward to confirm Nathan Whitmore's diagnosis of severe, complex PTSD, combined with depression and possible mild paranoia. He had refused therapy upon discharge from the military, relying instead on alcohol. The doctor's voice was grave as he described the extent of Nathan Whitmore's mental and emotional deterioration. He was not mentally ill before the war, the psychiatrist concluded, but the trauma changed him profoundly. Nathan Whitmore never lifted his gaze. Clara Whitmore wondered if he was even listening. The judge then delivered a brief statement, something about how they weren't punishing a soldier's service, but a husband's domestic abuse. The ring of truth in that statement rippled through the room. Nathan Whitmore's lawyer uttered a half-hearted defense, pointing to the horrors of combat and the lack of resources for returning veterans, but didn't contest the evidence. When the moment came for sentencing, the judge took a measured tone. Mr. Whitmore, the court finds you guilty of domestic assault, resisting arrest, and driving under the influence. We acknowledge your military service, but we cannot allow that to overshadow the harm you inflicted upon your wife. Therefore, you are sentenced to 3 years in state prison. However, as a condition of this sentence, you are mandated to participate in a structured PTSD treatment program while incarcerated. If you show substantial improvement and rehabilitation after 18 months, you may be eligible for conditional release. The gavel struck. A hush followed. Clara Whitmore released a trembling breath, neither triumphant nor devastated. This is just how it has to be. Nathan Whitmore turned his head then, glancing at her. She caught a flicker of something in his eyes, regret, resignation, maybe confusion. He didn't speak, didn't lash out. Deputies approached, guiding him out of the courtroom in handcuffs. He gave her a single nod, so subtle she might have imagined it.
Then he was gone. A low murmur swept through the attendees. Clara Whitmore stepped down from the stand, her legs threatening to give way. Eleanor Briggs stood, arms wide, and drew her into a silent embrace. Clara Whitmore stiffened briefly, not used to physical contact that wasn't violent, then let herself relax. She noticed her hands weren't shaking as they used to. Outside, the sunlight was bright, almost too bright, as they exited the courthouse. Clara Whitmore inhaled deeply, savoring the crisp air. There was no victorious sense of revenge, only a subdued acceptance. Perhaps it was enough that the system had recognized the truth. Nathan Whitmore would serve time, but he would also get the therapy he'd long refused. Whether he changed or not was another matter, but at least the opportunity existed. No one had been able to force it on him before. Maybe this was the only way. Eleanor Briggs escorted her to the sidewalk, where they lingered in that swirl of post-trial chaos. Attorneys, officials, random onlookers. Clara Whitmore glanced down at her own hands. They aren't trembling, she exhaled, tears threatening, not tears of sorrow, but of profound relief, mixed with the acknowledgement of how far she had come. "You did good, kid," Eleanor Briggs murmured, hugging her once more. Clara Whitmore nodded, a small smile ghosting her lips. "Thank you for everything. I'm not sure what I'd have done without you." No words needed to be said in return. Sometimes a shared glance of empathy was enough. They walked away from the courthouse together, uncertain of the future, but free from the terror that had once consumed every moment. Clara Whitmore settled into a modest wooden house in the outskirts of Bozeman. It wasn't large or just a single-story home with chipped white paint, a front porch she had helped Eleanor Briggs repair, and a few acres of fenced grassland that stretched toward the horizon. Compared to the isolating cabin where she once lived, this place felt alive. The wind carried the scent of open fields, and the distant hum of a highway reminded her that she wasn't alone in some forgotten corner of the state. A separate paddock stood at the back, newly built. There, Titan now had his own stall, complete with fresh straw and a sturdy door that Clara Whitmore carefully hammered into place herself. She took pride in every nail and plank. This was a home they had made, free of fear. Each morning she awoke not to Nathan Whitmore's rage, but to the soft glow of dawn and the clip-clop of Titan shifting in his stall. At first, she could hardly believe her luck. Waking up with nothing but calm in the air was an alien experience. No knot of dread coiled in her stomach, no second-guessing if her every step might incite violence. Though the bruises had faded to pale shadows, she still felt occasional twinges of pain when she moved too quickly, reminding her of the battles survived. She accepted them as scars that told a story of resilience. Eleanor Briggs came by weekly, bringing groceries, chatting about local news, or simply sharing a cup of tea on the porch. Sometimes they worked side by side, repainting shutters, planting a small vegetable patch, or checking the fence line so Titan couldn't wander. The older woman became something between a friend and a mentor, guiding Clara Whitmore through the labyrinth of emotional recovery. And Clara Whitmore discovered that life, once filled with silence and dread, could be reshaped into a quieter but healing routine. In time, she mustered the courage to volunteer at the Bozeman Domestic Violence Support Center. Initially, she only intended to do basic tasks, organizing paperwork, filing documents, maybe greeting clients at the front desk. But the center's staff soon saw something special in her. Despite her own trauma, Clara Whitmore had a gentle empathy that many of their clients desperately needed. When frightened women walked in, some bruised, some just terrified, Clara Whitmore's presence offered comfort. She knew the shame, the fear of not being believed, the sense of isolation. After 6 months, Clara Whitmore began to assist with small group sessions, specifically those involving women whose partners were veterans. They faced complicated layers of trauma, balancing respect for military service with the need to protect themselves. Clara Whitmore didn't pretend to be a therapist, but she could share her story. Sometimes that was enough to break the ice. "I'm not a professional," she would tell them, "but I survived. And sometimes surviving is the first step to rebuilding." Her words had an impact. A few women found the courage to leave abusive homes or to seek restraining orders. Others simply found solace in hearing they were not alone. Every time Clara Whitmore guided someone toward resources or helped them breathe through their panic attacks, she felt her own wounds stitching together a little more. Of course, not every day was bright. Nights still brought echoes of the past. More than once, she startled awake, convinced she heard the cabin door slam, or Nathan Whitmore's footstep in the hall. Sometimes she dreamed of him glaring at her with the belt in hand, or of the nights he woke yelling for lost brothers in arms. In those moments, she'd jolt upright in bed, heart hammering. But now she had a coping strategy. She would rise, pull on a warm jacket, and step outside where the open sky reminded her she was free. Titan also played a huge role in her healing. Early each morning she led him out to the open field, letting him gallop without restraint. She never used a whip, never forced him. If she wanted a ride, she let him sense her intention, and he'd lower his head, allowing her to mount without a bridle. It seemed the horse understood each subtle motion of her body, responding to gentle shifts of weight or a quiet nudge of her heel. Often she trotted through dew-laced grass, breathing in crisp air, feeling the sun warm her skin. "No fences caging me anymore," she mused one day, tears slipping down her cheeks at the realization. Local children were drawn to the tall black horse with the soulful eye. Sometimes they'd gather by the fence, giggling with curiosity. Clara Whitmore would walk over, open the gate, and invite them in. Titan was patient, gently nudging small hands that reached to pat his muzzle. She would watch from a short distance, smiling. A genuine, deep smile that felt foreign on her lips at first, but gradually more natural. A wandering veterinarian, upon examining Titan, remarked how unusually attuned he was to human emotion. Clara Whitmore just shrugged, replying, "He's no longer a warrior, he's a guide." She carried her scars, visible and invisible. On cold nights, an ache flared in her wrists or across her back. Other times she felt an unexpected jolt of anxiety if she heard a door slam too loudly, but she learned to breathe through it, to let the fear pass instead of controlling her. Instead of hiding the marks on her skin, she recognized them as proof she had endured. "These are my stories," she would say if someone asked about a faint, rope-like scar on her forearm. "I survived them. I'm still here." One evening in late autumn, she sat by the small fireplace in her living room, Titan already tucked in his stall for the night. A letter arrived from a lawyer in town. She opened it, scanning the contents. It informed her that Nathan Whitmore was showing compliance and improvement in his court-mandated PTSD. He had stayed sober, participated in group therapy, and might be eligible for conditional release ahead of the 3-year mark. Clara Whitmore stared at the words, a swirl of conflicting emotions, a relief that he was getting help, worry he might revert. An odd sense of calm settled in her chest. She wasn't angry anymore, just uncertain. She read the letter twice, then folded it neatly. Later, by the fireplace's soft glow, she caught herself murmuring, "I hope he uses this chance well." Life moved on. Leaves turned gold, then fell away, replaced by the stark lines of winter trees. Clara Whitmore spent more hours in the support center, occasionally sharing her journey in group session. She was no hero, just a woman who had learned that love could survive atrocities, though not always in the way one expected. She told them that she still believed in kindness, that not every veteran was doomed to repeat Nathan Whitmore's mistakes, but that no woman deserved to be a casualty of someone else's war. Time flowed in gentle rhythms now, marked by sunrises and sunsets rather than the beat. She found unexpected joy in the mundane, brewing tea in a quiet kitchen, crocheting small blankets to donate, even just watching Titan play in the pasture. Each moment contained a promise that she was not defined by violence. On a chilly autumn afternoon, she decided to record her reflections in a worn leather journal Eleanor Briggs had given her. With the yard bathed in dusky sunlight, she wrote,
I used to think freedom meant escaping someone. Now I realize freedom is not being terrified of footsteps behind me. She paused, the pen trembling slightly. I won't let my life be consumed by what happened. I can't. That's not living. In the distance, she heard a soft neigh. A gentle smile touched her lips. Thank you, Titan. Turning to a fresh page, she jotted down the next lines. Healing isn't a single step. It's 1,000 small steps. Each day, a new chance to walk away from fear. I survived. That's enough for now. She closed the journal and rose, stepping onto the porch. Over the fence she saw Titan raise his head, ears pricked, as though acknowledging her presence. The horse let out a low whinny, his breath forming clouds in the cooling air. Clara Whitmore leaned against the porch railing, eyes drifting up to the boundless Montana sky. She breathed in the crisp scent of autumn leaves, letting a sense of calm fill her lungs. Was it the ending of her story? Hardly. She suspected the nightmares would still visit from time to time. Her scars would remind her of a past she wished she could forget. But now there was also light, both the literal morning sun and the figurative glow of self-worth. She had forged a new life in these open fields, forging fresh bonds with people who cared about her, forging new trust in her own strength. As night crept in, the wind brushed her face, gentle yet bracing. She could feel the future calling, uncertain, but full of promise. She had learned that survival was not just about eluding death or violence. It was about rediscovering how to truly live, day by day. A quiet laugh escaped her lips. She placed a hand over her heart, murmuring words only she and the evening air could hear. I'm free. A rustle of movement drew her attention to the paddock gate. Titan ambled forward, tail swishing in the twilight. Clara Whitmore raised a hand in greeting. The horse let out a soft nicker, as though to say, I'm here. With a final glance at the horizon, where the sun had dipped beneath rolling hills, she stepped off the porch and headed toward the paddock to see him. The last vestiges of daylight framed them both in silhouette. A woman with scars turned to strength, and a horse once known for quiet acceptance, but who had become a fierce protector. The cabin in the mountains and the horrors within it felt distant now, like a half-remembered nightmare. Here, in the gentle hush of dusk, she and Titan stood side by side, survivors, in the open air. No fairy tale resolution was guaranteed. Life rarely offers neat, happy ending. But there was at least a hopeful one. A promise that healing could happen, that compassion mattered, and that sometimes the darkest nights yield to mornings of quiet grace. Clara Whitmore tilted her head back, gazing at the first stars peeking through the indigo sky. A soft smile touched her lips, her first wholly genuine smile in years. She was alive, she was free, and she had chosen this future. That was more than enough. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know your favorite part. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories like this one. And don't hit the notification bell so you're always updated on our latest content. Your support truly means the world to us. As dawn broke across the sky, painting the horizon in delicate hues of rose and gold, Clara stood quietly at the edge of the paddock. The wind whispered through the trees like a lullaby. She closed her eyes, feeling Titan's warm breath at her shoulder, grounding her. In that moment, she realized something profound. Freedom wasn't just escape. It was choosing peace again and again. Every breath she took now was a decision to keep moving forward, to never again be silenced by fear. The journey ahead would still be long, but for the first time in years, she no longer walked it alone, and that made all the difference.